Ethan scored a 1510 on the SAT after being stuck in the 1100s for more than 5 months. He was a straight A student, 4.0 GPA. His report card said one thing and the SAT score says something completely different. And he was even starting to believe that the schools that he really wanted to get into were just off the table. But then just 21 weeks later, we helped him score a 1510 without grinding more hours, without pulling up more practice tests or memorizing thousands of vocab words. All we did was guide him through a simple 3-step process that we call the 1500 method. And in this video, I'm going to break down exactly how we did it and how you can take and apply the exact same thing for your team. But if you'd rather have us run a diagnosis on your team and build a plan specifically for them, then there's a link in the description of this video where you can book an assessment call with my team. When Ethan's parents first reached out, the thing they kept coming back to was that the score didn't make any sense. He had a 4.0 and was getting straight A's in the hardest classes that his school offered. The kind of report card where you assume that the SAT is just gonna take care of itself. And then it came back and it was an 1120. Everyone around him told him the same thing. He's a smart kid. He should be fine. But he wasn't. And he was doing what most teens do when the score won't move. He was just doing more practice tests, more problems, more hours. There wasn't really any plan behind it. There wasn't any diagnosis. It was just volume. And every practice test came back around the same spot. So you've got this smart, capable, hardworking kid slowly starting to wonder, like, is there something wrong with me? But there wasn't anything wrong with him. Nobody just showed him how to do it yet. So this is where the 1500 method really comes in. There's 3 total phases. And phase 1 is the foundation of everything. Because Ethan's score problem was never an ability problem. It was a gap problem. He had specific gaps, and gaps don't get fixed by just doing more general practice, because more practice doesn't necessarily mean more insight. For example, you can take 20 practice tests and make the same mistakes 20 times. So what we did is we ran a full diagnostic across each and every SAT section individually. And I don't mean another practice test with a score slapped on it. I mean going question by question, figuring out exactly which question types he's losing points on, where his time is going. Because imagine this, he answers the question correctly, your standard SAT is going to show you like, yeah, you got this question correctly. What it's not going to show you is that he spent 10 minutes on that question. And that is a bad thing, even though he answered the question correctly. On the other hand, if he was not able to answer a question, or he guessed and guessed wrong, meaning either there was no answer or the answer was wrong, but we see that he only spent 10 seconds on it, that means that he correctly identified, hey, I don't know how to solve this. He moved on, and that is actually the correct thing to do. So with our detailed diagnostic, we're able to see exactly where he slows down and where he rushes. So picture this, Ethan brings a question he got wrong. Most tutors would solve it for him, right? Show the steps, explain the rule, and then move on to the next one. We don't do that. We ask him, how would you solve this? And he starts explaining. I read the passage, I did this, and then I picked C. And somewhere inside that explanation, the gap is gonna expose itself, because he'll say something like, well, the question was asking for the main idea, but that wasn't it. It was asking something more specific, and now we know something no score report could ever tell us. It's not that Ethan can't read, it's just that he's answering a slightly different question than the one that was actually asked. And here's why that matters so much. Where a teen thinks they're struggling is almost never the root cause. Ethan told us how bad he was at reading. He wasn't bad at reading. He was just misreading what the questions were asking. He was missing patterns the test reuses over and over and over again. And then he would rush questions he would have otherwise nailed if he just took 20 more seconds. You see, this is not a knowledge gap. This is a mechanics and test taking strategy gap. And you only find it when the student talks about how they're going through the question out loud. Now, this is also the part that explains how a 4.0 student ends up with an 1120 in the first place. Because I know that sounds like it makes no sense. But think about what a test in school looks like. Your teacher tells you, test on Friday, chapter 6 and 7, and you know exactly what's coming. You learned it 2 weeks ago, you show your work, and you get partial credit. But the SAT doesn't give you any of that. It can pull anything you've touched since freshman year, some of which you've long forgotten, and there's also a clock running and the entire time putting pressure on you, and also there is no partial credit. If you pick the right answer, you get the point. If you didn't, you do not. So that's a completely different game with different rules, and nobody teaches these rules on AP chemistry, for example. So nothing was wrong with Ethan. He's just never been taught the test as its own separate skill. So phase 2, apply and practice. Once we map out exactly what he needs to work on, the tutoring becomes very simple. Everything's gonna be pointed at the exact leaks and nothing else. He got weekly one-on-one coaching, not a room with 30 kids in it where you hope that the teacher, was able to answer your kid's question. His homework was also built specifically from the exact weak question types that he's struggling on. So if geometry was fine, he never touched it. I mean, why would he? He's already carrying a full AP load. The last thing a busy teen needs is homework for the sake of just doing something. We want to give him 30 to 60 minutes a day aimed specifically at the handful of things that are holding his number down. And that's about it. And the feedback in the session teaches him how to think through the test, not just memorize the answers. We'll also track absolutely everything. Every single week, the diagnostic shows you the red areas, the weak spots, and the whole job week by week is turning red areas into green. The best part is that his parents could see it all happening right in front of their eyes. They always knew where he stood instead of just studying in the dark for 3 months and just praying for the results to be good on the actual test day. Phase 3, we simulate the success. So once the gaps were closing, we made sure to pressure test all of that, right? That means full practice exams, timed, proctored, and built slightly harder than the actual SAT, and that is on purpose. Because if you just know the material, that doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be able to perform under time pressure. Those are two different skills. The first simulation feels like the real thing. He's gonna get the nerves, the time pressure, all of it. But by the 6th or 7th, it's just a routine. He's just going through the motions, he's already done it. So when the real test day comes, it just feels like a slightly easier version of what he's already been doing dozens of times. And that is the whole point. You wanna get the nerves to completely stop. And then there is one more piece to this, and it mattered as much as anything that I've mentioned so far. When Ethan started, he didn't believe this could even work. And we understand why. When you're a straight A student and the one test that matters keeps coming back to you below standard, you start telling yourself a story, right? Maybe I'm just not a 1500 kid. Maybe this is not my level. And you cannot talk a teenager out of that story. We didn't even try to do that. What actually changes perspective is the evidence. By the end of the first month, his practice test has already crossed a 1300. And you could see the shift happen in his eyes. Suddenly, he wasn't hoping this would work. He was actually watching it work. Every red area that turned green was proof, was more confidence. And the score just kept on building and building, and his confidence kept on rising right behind it. Because now he knew it wasn't a him problem. There was nothing wrong with him. It was just a structure problem. And once the whole preparation was finally built around him, the kid everybody kept calling smart finally had a score that represents that. And 21 weeks after we started, he sat the real SAT, he walked in perfectly calm and scored a 1510. But more importantly, his parents never had to explain away a number that didn't fit their kid. And Ethan walked away with something bigger than just the test. He learned that being smart and knowing how to perform are two different things. And the second one can be built, and that's gonna stay with him for the rest of his life. So if you're watching this thinking, yeah, this sounds exactly like my teen, then let me tell you what most parents do. They just wait. They kind of hope that the next practice test comes back higher than the last. And it almost never does, because more practice doesn't necessarily create more insight. What changes things is someone actually sitting down with your teen and finding out exactly where the points and the time are leaking. And once that happens, the score moves faster than you would ever expect. Obviously not overnight. Most of the jumps that we get still take 10 or 12 weeks of focused work. And Ethan's transformation took close to 5 months because his score jump was just absolutely massive. But the time is gonna pass anyway, and the SAT test dates close in faster than you think. So if you want a plan like this built specifically for your teen, then there's a link in the description below where you can book a completely free assessment with my team. We'll go over exactly what they're struggling with, what you guys have tried so far, what the goals are, and then build a completely custom plan.